Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for your patience. I'm sorry that it's taking so long to get this meeting going. It's truly a pleasure for me to be here with all of you for a special meeting, it's a meeting of the City Council as a whole. Let's just start the meeting. Mr. Clerk, can you please, are you ready to start the meeting? Yeah. Can you please call the roll, please?
Assistant Clerk Fajardo will be calling the roll.
Thanks.
Council President Matos,
Present.
Councilwoman Anthony,
Present.
Councilwoman Castillo,
Present.
Councilman Correa, absent. Councilman Espinal,
Present.
Councilman Goncalves, absent. Councilwoman Harris, absent. Councilman Igliozzi,
Present.
Councilor Kerwin, absent. Councilwoman LaFortune, absent. Councilor Miller,
Present.
Councilman Narducci,
Yeah.
Councilwoman Ryan,
Present.
Councilor Salvatore, absent. Councilman Taylor, absent. We have 8 present, 7 absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you. I just want to say again, we're here for this presentation. We wanted to make sure that we were able to have this discussion with all the members of the City Council that would like to be part of, in making sure that it's a way in which our decision-making for the future is well-informed in this data that is being provided. And also, we're having the meeting this way to ensure that there is not violation of open meeting laws of council members that would like to be part of this discussion, okay? The clerk is gonna be sharing the screen. Shauna, just a second. Okay. So we're gonna have this presentation from Growth Smart, which is gonna tell us some data about what would be the impact of population growth for the state of Rhode Island, and what would be the impact also for the city of Providence. So all of you got the report that was sent to us in a communication back in December. And I just gonna I know we have a city council meeting that's gonna start at 5:30. And again, I apologize that we are delayed on starting this meeting. But what I want to do is I want to turn the meeting over to Scott Wolf and John from the John Flaherty from the Growth Smart, and also to Dave Caldwell, who were the ones that had the initial thought about how to do this report. And then I'm going to let Dave and Scott and Sean to introduce the experts that did this work, okay? So who would like to start? Dave, do you want to start, Dave? Then go to John.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll try to be brief, but the idea for this study was born out of a piece of work Professor Tabaldi did in 2015 that showed the impact of school-aged children on the Rhode Island economy, which is actually very positive. The state of Rhode Island and many of our municipalities treat our children and families like liabilities when they are in fact assets. And the year 2020 has shown us where a lot of those essential assets really are, and how they've quite frankly not been well treated over for quite some time. What you'll see presented to you is born out of the hypothesis that growth is a good thing and it should be what the state desires. But under the current situation, under a growth scenario, the benefits will accrue to the state while the costs are borne by the city. If we crack that nut, the city can both be successful and send the state buckets of cash to fill the structural deficit about which we hear every year. So it is our opinion, and I've seen nothing to dissuade me based on the evidence Professors Tabaldi and Berdiev have produced, that this could not be done over a horizon. That's the model in front of you. And if anyone has any questions, please jump in now or later, but that is the big picture before us today.
Yeah, I just want to add to Dave's excellent overview that Rhode Island has obviously had a stagnant population growth overall for decades. Providence has had a little uptick, but not dramatic over the last couple decades. And as a result of the state's overall stagnant population growth, we're at risk of losing a congressional district. And I don't think we're providing the level of economic opportunity and economic mobility for our people or customers for our Main Street merchants that would be desirable. And so those are some of the things that motivated Grow Smart Rhode Island to partner with the Builders Association to have this study conducted. And we appreciate President Mattos' support for it and the support of the whole city council for this initiative. So let's turn it over to the professors who actually conducted this study and analysis. Eddie Tabaldi and Aziz Berdiev, both of Bryant University. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Scott. And Madam President, thank you for this opportunity to talk to the council. We really appreciate it. My colleague Aziz Berdiev is here. Aziz?
Thank you all very much for having us. We looking forward to this presentation.
City Clerk, I can't hear.
Chairman, just 1 second.
Madam President, I can't hear. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
we can.
I have no
We,
audio.
we can hear.
all right. Well, if I'm allowed to proceed, I'd like to share my screen. I don't have that ability at this point.
Who would like to have control of the screen? Because I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to give whoever would like to be advancing the slides control of my screen.
That would be to Eddie Tabaldi. He will
Yes.
he will advance the slides.
Yes, if you can give me control here, again, would it be possible for me to have control on the presentation?
Yes, you should see a message on your screen right now that you have control.
No, I can, no, I don't have control on the presentation itself.
Do you see the screen? Let's try one more time. I will stop it and I will restart it. If you are on your Zoom screen, can you see the presentation?
I can see the presentation, but if you would allow me to share my screen, I could actually have full control.
Yeah, can you do that?
I'm glad to do that. You should see a notification to take control of my screen right now, but if you're not seeing that, I can.
Right now it says that the host has disabled screen sharing on my end.
Yes. Yeah, that's because I was going to give you control of my screen, but if you'd like to share, I can do that for you.
Oh, thank you, Sean.
You sure this was meant to be?
Excellent. I do have control. I appreciate that. So I'm going to be doing most of the talk, but my colleague Aziz Berdiev will jump in when needed to fill any gaps I may leave behind. Before I start, I have done a lot of work about our state economy, and most times people will ask about what are the key challenges for our state to grow, and what's the key component to get the economy on a much faster path for both job creation and income creation. And my answer has been, it's the people. It's our people. it's our labor force. And this report, to some degree, goes through the data and give us a sense of how important that is. Again, as my colleagues Dave and Scott mentioned, they asked both me and Professor Berdiv to think about this issue over a year ago. And we put together the resources that we could to fundamentally answer a few questions for us. The first one is, we all know that both the nation, New England and Rhode Island faces a very challenging demographic situation with the aging of the population. At the same time, this challenging condition can be a phenomenal opportunity for us to think about how to best use the human capital, the resource that we have around us, and how population can play a role in that redefining of the path for growth. So our work was designed to answer these questions that you see. First is, what would be the benefits of this increase in population if we could bring more people here to our economy? And but then, of course, if we have more people here, we have to provide more public services. That means we have to spend more money. So the question is, who pays the bill by the end of the day to facilitate and bring more people to live in Providence or in Rhode Island? So that's the fundamental idea behind this exercise. We did the best we could to get the best data available out there. We took data from multiple sources in this exercise. We also used two packages, REMI and InPlan, to do some of the calculations of the simulations that we had to do in this report. And the idea is, again, to use the best tools, the best data that we could to deliver a data-driven assessment of what's happening. So the way that this presentation is organized, first I'm going to provide an overview of where we are, then talk a little bit about what assumptions are we making about population, and then conclude with the data and the simulations that we put together in terms of the impact on our economy. The first piece of information that, at least to me, is very telling is in front of you right now. Is it's showing what has happened to the population of the city of Providence since 1790. And we see these phases. First, we see population growth until the late 1930s, early 1940s. Then population declined together with the decline of our economy during that time. And there was this slow rebounding since the 1980s. But if you look ahead, the projections coming from our Department of Administration, it's indicating that over the next 2 decades, we may see just about 10,000 more people living in Providence. So our population will be close to 190,000 people. And if you again go back in time, that's about the same level of population that we had about 100 years ago. So really, I think telling path on what's happening to our population. This is telling us what is projected to happen to the population of Rhode Island, not Providence. I just showed Providence. And it's a very busy chart, but the message is the following. Population is going to grow very slowly. But if you look to the pyramid, the only cohort of the population that's going to grow is the 65 years and older. That means the working age population will in fact decrease over the next decades. And the labor force is the most important asset to foster growth in our economy. So with a shrinking labor force, that poses a major challenge for job creation, income creation in our state, including to bring new businesses here. If we take also the data that we have over the last 2 decades, this shows the employment in the city of Providence. It's not only flat, depending on how we look to private and private plus government, but in fact, it went down compared to, if you take 2019 data and compare to 2002 data, we actually have fewer people employed in the city of Providence now than what we had about 20 years ago. So the employment base is really stagnant. Then if you think, well, what sectors of our economy are expanding, which ones are shrinking? So our economy, I mean, the economy of Providence is fundamentally based in healthcare, very important sector. It's a high paying sector, very important to us. Educational services, leisure and hospitality, and government. Those are the biggest sectors we have in our economy. The problem is we have many sectors of our economy that's actually contracting. If you take all sectors below this orange line, those are sectors in which the number of jobs actually reduced over the last 2 decades. So we have growth taking place in just a few sectors of our economy. That also poses a challenge moving forward in terms of diversifying our employment bases and create jobs for a very diverse population. The final piece of this overview of where we are is we need to just put this into perspective. I'm very sure this is data that you know much better than I do, but over 70% of the spending coming from the city of Providence is allocated to only 2 sectors or departments. That's public schools and public safety. So we have to start thinking about how is this related to the structure of population that we have, and how would this change if population also change over time. So with this piece of evidence or of data, we start thinking about the pressing issues and how to frame the questions that we have at hand. As we start the exercise, a few pieces of information just popped up that was very, very telling for us. And the first one that is really interesting is what happened to the number of children who were actually enrolled in K through 12 schools in Providence, in the Providence School District. And this is that gray line, and what we see is a decline in the number of students, K through 12 students in Providence. Then if you take the other 2 lines, the blue and orange lines, they are inflation-adjusted spending per student, going back to 2001. So as the number of children went down, the average cost per student went up. Well, this could be just a simple correlation, and we have other confounding factors here that could explain this. But there is also a potential for economies of scale. That means smaller school districts would face higher cost per student because we have a lot of fixed cost that would have to be divided by a smaller number of students. And again, there is some evidence here that that may be the case in Providence. So as part of the exercise, we look to what has happened in other states across the country. We researched the studies that were conducted, looking into both the benefits of population and the potential costs of population. And we can basically summarize that more people or a larger population or growing population tend to be very positive and highly correlated to the things that foster prosperity. That's innovation, knowledge diffusion, productivity growth. It facilitates the matching of skills that employers are looking for and what employees have. And it really makes the economy more dynamic when we have more people. And of course, as the population grows, there is an increase in the demand for public services. So of course, the city or the state, we have to make more investment in infrastructure. That's a capital investment. And also current spending, you of course increase to respond to the demand for public services. The question that's important here is, do we have or face economies of scale or not? So what happens to the average cost to deliver public services as the population changes? Because if we do have economies of scale, that means the average cost per person goes down as the population increases, or the city becomes more denser. That means that more people may actually help to lower the average cost per person. Those are questions that we asked in this exercise, in this review that we made from the literature. Again, Aziz, feel free to jump in anytime to help here.
Yeah, so just to look, in our assessment of the literature, it was important for us to look back to see what insights could we gain from previous studies, and specifically our focus was the United States. And while the literature was very clear on the potential benefits of population growth, as Professor Tabali just talked about, entrepreneurship was very big in the United States. Just job growth was across many of the studies that we've reviewed. There were studies that came out of Federal Reserve banks that talked about how patents increased in areas where, in cities and municipalities where they experienced population growth. While on the cost side of it, the public finance side of it, the literature was not that clear cut. And that is because what Professor Tabali keeps talking about in the past few slides is that do these areas and do these cities experience what we talk about economies of scale, where per person cost may decrease as population will increase, or would they experience diseconomies of scale? So the literature was not very clear, and it really depended on the existing population, existing composition, and various other confounding factors that could have impacted this relationship. So our goal and our attempt in this report was to focus, of course, on the city of Providence and look into the data to answer the specific question.
Thank you, Aziz. So far, again, what I have done is to give you the background of what we're trying to accomplish and some general information. So when it came to run these simulations, we actually, our colleagues Dave and Scott and John Marco Antonio, they suggested some numbers, and we started looking to what could be feasible in terms of population growth. And we also looked into a scenario that could bring us back to the peak population we had seen in Providence in the 1940s, early 1940s. So this chart is showing what is the expected population growth. For instance, if we follow the Department of Administration, we would end in 2050 with about 192,000 people in Providence. Our simulation, our scenario A, we assume that population is going to grow a little bit faster, at about 0.5% per year, and that would bring the population of the city to 208,000 people in Providence. And then our very aggressive scenario would be, again, to bring population back to the 1940s level. That would be 250,000 people. To accomplish that, our city has to see an increase in population at a rate of 1.1%. That's pretty aggressive, very fast. In this exercise, we did not discuss if we can accomplish that. We basically assumed if this would happen, then how would the economy respond? What would be the benefits of that? What would be the cost of getting that done? So the first thing that we learned is related to the density or population density in Providence. We are right now here with 2016 data, even though 2019 data doesn't change this position. We rank top 25 densest city in the country. But the population density right now is, of course, much smaller than what we'd see in other big metropolitan areas like New York or San Francisco. If scenario A or B would pass, of course, population density would increase. For instance, in scenario A, that would move Providence among the top 20 densest city in the country. And if scenario A would pass, we would be among the top 10 densest city in the country. But population density would still be much lower than what we'd see in Boston right now, this year, or in Cambridge. So this is basically to say that it is feasible, that these number of people could move into Providence that would cause an increase in density, but it's something we have seen in other cities. So through the packages and the data that we had, we could simulate the benefits to the city's economy. And it's pretty clear cut. More people would bring more employment. Of course, they would be here and generate more income. And the numbers are pretty striking. For instance, with scenario A, would see about 13,500 jobs, additional jobs in Providence, if again population would grow at that pace, at about 0.5% per year. In our scenario B, the most aggressive scenario, we're going to have over 22,000 jobs created in Providence. And that would generate between $2.4 billion to $4.2 billion, depending on what happens on those two scenarios. So job creation or employment together with income creation, that of course will create tax revenues for both the state government and the city of Providence. The key issue for policymaking here is who gets most of that. We know that sales taxes, income taxes, and corporate taxes will of course go to the state government. And the one that stays in Providence will be property taxes. And in our simulations, we find that, for instance, in scenario A, this changing population would create or generate almost $140 million in new tax revenues combined. But in property tax, that would be about half of that, $67.9 million. In the most aggressive scenario, that number almost doubled to $240 million in total taxes collected, and about $150 million in property taxes. The message here is, yes, more people live in Providence would be good for the city, would generate more taxes, but is actually pretty good for the state government because of all of the benefits that comes with these people in terms of tax revenue generation.
And just to add to that, about 46% in our estimation, 46% of the tax revenue will go to the state of Rhode Island. So, which is and the rest, of course, would be the city of Providence. So close to if we look at I think it's on the next slide, right, Eddie? If we look at the scenario A, about 64.4 million will go towards the state, and on the scenario B will be approximately 110 million. Again, that's about 46% in both cases that the state would gain in tax revenues.
That's correct. So again, the big picture here is population growth is good for the economy. And that's not controversial. There is nothing surprising in this exercise so far. The question then is, how do we pay the bills? And what happens down the road? This is the first simulation of demand for K through 12 public schooling, public education. And this is, again, another very busy chart, and I apologize for that. This gray line is where we are right now. That's the number of children enrolled in K through 12 schools in Providence. And what we find is, in scenario A, for instance, that's very reasonable. The number of children that would be in our schools by 2050 is not that much higher than what we have right now. So we see some growth in 2030, 2040, but because of changes in other demographic factors, there is no major shift or change in demand for schooling at the end of the cycle, even though we're going to have, of course, to increase the number of seats available to students. In this very aggressive scenario, in which population will grow to 250,000 people, we'd still see about 30,000, just over 30,000 children enrolled in K through 12 public schools in Providence. Keep in mind, in the early 2000s, that number was just under 29,000. So this increase in population actually bring the size of the school district to be just a little bit over the size of the school district in the early 2000s. And I think it's very important to keep that in mind. Again, yes, that's going to increase demand, but by how much? Well, it's not so much, and actually something we have seen in the past. Of course, the demand for other public services will also increase, public safety, infrastructure, so on and so forth. And we actually simulated two scenarios that could pass in terms of the cost structure. The first scenario, we assume that the cost per student or the cost per person to deliver these public services would be exactly what we have today. So it will not change. That means we don't have economies of scale. The average cost today is going to be the same average cost in the future. If that would happen, in scenario A, the city of Providence would have to spend $71.4 million to provide the services that would be needed by this new population. And then you have the breakdown of that by department. However, if we would look to potential to increase efficiency and potential for economies of scale, that number changes a lot. And we run a few simulations, we run some models. The first one is in Rhode Island, not only Providence, in Rhode Island, it seems that we have economies of scale. Smaller school districts, they have much higher costs per student. And in our econometric exercise, we actually found evidence of economies of scale in schooling here. So that means increase the number of children in the school system in Providence would lead to an increase in total cost. But on a per student basis, the increase is not as high as we'd see otherwise. In public safety, there is also potential to increase efficiency. And the simulation we have is based on the assumption that the number of officers or employees in the police department would be aligned to the national average on a population basis. If we could achieve that, that would allow for, again, increase in efficiency, even bringing more people. We have to spend more money, but not so much more money. To make this very, again, busy slide easier, the message is the following. If nothing changes, we need over $71 million to meet the demands of the population that would be coming under scenario A. But if we can make changes to improve the efficiency in the delivery of public services and take advantage of economies of scale, that number drops by more than half, just over $30 million. And that's way less than the revenues that would be generated in tax revenues or in property taxes for the city of Providence. And scenario B, the situation is very similar. What changed just the numbers, but the message is the same. There is potential to generate the revenues needed to meet the increase in spending to deliver public services. There should have the report and can consult on that. So let's jump to the key takeaways from this exercise. The numbers that we put together, the models that we run, and again, this is a data-driven exercise. We, of course, had to make some assumptions here that could change the metrics, but the message is very consistent. Population growth is very important because it supports economic growth. It comes with more job creation, comes with more income creation too. There will also be an increase in revenues coming from income taxes, real estate property taxes, corporate taxes, sales taxes, and so on. And that some of that will go to the state government, some of that will go to the city of Providence. There is potential to make these increase in spending revenue neutral, in the sense that if the city can take advantage of economies of scale or increase efficiency in the delivery of public services, this new population will not represent additional cost to support the demand from that. What is very important to recognize here on this exercise is the state is benefiting by receiving more tax revenues, but most of the cost you bear on the city of Providence. And this is telling us that there is a need for a city-state partnership. If we want to increase population in Providence or in other cities in Rhode Island, the state has to be an agent that will support that. And you also take will be responsible for some of the costs that will be associated with that, especially in infrastructure. So that's very important to be recognized. And that's a message that the governor and the legislature has to be mindful of. Population growth is something that the state has to lead, and of course cities have to be partners on that initiative because again of the benefits to the state economy and not so much in terms of cost. However, our assessment also shows that these two scenarios that we're talking about, they're very challenging to make them reality. The studies that we have reviewed across the nation show that two fundamental factors drive population migration or migration in general. It's employment, you have to have a job, and the place has to be affordable or relatively affordable. And housing is the key component to explain affordability. So if a place is unaffordable and housing is contributing to make it unaffordable, people will look for another location to of course, relocate their families. Also, the data that we see is showing that these unaffordable cities, they are losing population, not bringing new population. That means the city of Providence has to be very mindful of that. If we want to bring more people here, we have to think about affordability, and housing is critical to that, as is job creation. So in our simulations, what we find is actually panel B of this exercise shows that in scenario A, the one in which population grows to about 208,000 people, that would generate a demand for over 23,000 housing units in the city of Providence to meet that demand. If our very aggressive scenario that to bring population back to 250,000 people, that would demand developing over 42,000 new housing units in the city to meet that demand. So this is very important. Housing is very important. Employment, job creation is very important. So putting all of this together, this is the conclusion of this exercise. If Providence and Rhode Island wants to see more people coming our way, we have to think about the incentives for migration. The state has not done well over the last 3 decades in terms of population growth. We rank at the bottom among the 50 states in terms of population growth. I mean, the state of Rhode Island. So we have to realign the incentives to make sure that we retain the people we have here and attract new people to the state and to Providence. To do that, we need to think about housing. So housing supply is perhaps the single most important factor to get that accomplished. And of course, my colleagues from the Rhode Island Build Association, they like that. But this is to say that the conclusion is completely unrelated to that. They are doing pretty well the way things are right now. And we all know that the Rhode Island housing market right now is really hot. And one of the key reasons is constrained housing supply. We also have to think about ways to increase the efficiency in how we deliver, how we provide public service to our population. So that has to be a priority for policymakers. And then there is a need to work with the state government. There is a need for a partnership. So the state will be a partner in this initiative to bring more people to our state and to Providence. And to accomplish that, what we need is to create an environment that facilitates job creation. That means we need entrepreneurs that will think about new ways of doing business. We'll take advantage of our potential of our population that we have here, potential of the population that may come here to actually foster job creation and make this a vibrant place. That will be key to bring new people that would allow these two scenarios to pass. With that, I conclude this presentation. Aziz, do you have anything else to add?
No, thank you, Eddie.
Thank you, Aziz. So at this point, I'll be happy to take any questions, comments, or provide clarifications about this exercise.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, but I just want to check with the members of the City Council to see if anybody else has any questions before I jump in. Okay. All right. So the first question that I have is, you talk about the infrastructure need in order to accomplish this population growth. If you were to give us an advice to rank which one we should look at for infrastructure that is needed, which one would you say that it is?
Schools. Again, the most important asset for us is people. It's the children, is our education. So, and the city is responsible for that particular piece of infrastructure. So I would say, if you think about what's happening right now in front of us, the future means we have to have some education from 2019 and some part of what we have developed in 2020. That means every single children in our schools should have a computer to take home with them, to use at school. They should have access to internet. And I think that should be a priority. That's the infrastructure. Then we have to have buildings, school buildings that are modern, that allows for innovation. That means more infrastructure investment. So the top one is for sure investments in our schools to prepare the labor force of the future.
Just to add to Eddie, every single study that we've reviewed on human capital and its association with economic development and growth repeatedly indicate that investment in education, investment in human capital is a key to growth and development. So this is in line. Professor Tebaldi's answer is very much in line with the whole literature that has existed for decades.
Thank you. I have one more question. At the beginning of the presentation, you talk about, actually this is related to the schools. In the question that I have is if you notice that we were losing students because they moved out of the city or because they were taken out of the public school system and went into a private school system. Were you able to look at any of that data?
Yes, that's an excellent question. The number of students in the private school system has increased, but not that much. So in fact, the fundamental cause of the decline in the number of children in our schools, the public school system, is because of changes in demographics. We have fewer children and a smaller pool of students in Providence. So it's not a substitution effect between public and private. It's really a change in population.
And just to follow up on that, I have conversations with individuals that have moved out of the city that have young families, and one of the reasons they tell me is because of the school. Do you have any data? Were you able to find any data that shows that families with school-age kids are moving out of the city?
I don't have that data. At least we have not been able to identify that. What data that we have processed from sources like the American Community Survey shows that we are actually losing the young population, the people who are graduating from college or who have like a few years after college graduation, they are leaving for jobs in other places. Those are the people who have children. So that means a problem for us. I could talk about a personal situation. Like I have many colleagues at Bryant who are still, they are young and they want to have children. And most of them, they're living in cities, either in Massachusetts or in other places. And the key reason is are afraid that their kids do not get the best possible education in some of our cities. And of course, all know about the issues in Providence. So that's for sure a critical piece to attract more people to the city.
Thank you. Any questions from anybody else? Right. So with that, I just want to go back to Dave. Dave, do you have any final message you want the council members to leave us with that you want us to think about? And just so you know, I'm going to send this study to the special committee on economic growth to continue the work on this area. But I just want to know if you have any final message for the council members about this work.
Sure. The message is that growth is good for the city and the state, and the broad shoulders and strong back of Providence can carry Rhode Island out of the malaise that we're in. We can lead the way back, but we have to work together to do it, and Providence can't do it all or be expected to do it all on their own. And I'm happy to take that message to the State House as well, with a lot of other people, if that is the desire of the council.
Dave, I have to say, you make me look really bad again. It took me 40 minutes to go through this, and you summarized that in 2 sentences. So,
Thanks. I have to say, Dave, that we really want to take you on that offer, and I'm looking forward to doing more work on this area. As I said, I'm going to refer this to a special committee on economic growth, because I think we need to have a plan to go to the State House and make the case for this work in Providence, to happen in Providence. Okay? John and Scott, I don't know if you have any final message before we end.
Well, I first thank you again for the opportunity to share what I think is some pretty important research and analysis. And secondly, as I think all of you on the council know, while Providence is only 20% of the state's population, it's 50% roughly of the state's economy, of the state's gross domestic product. So if Providence isn't thriving and growing, the state isn't going to thrive and grow. And the state does need to step up to the plate to help both the city and the state grow.
Yeah. You're speaking my language. Thank you so much. So with that, you guys are gonna hear back from us with the special committee on economic growth. We're gonna be doing more work on that area. Again, I just wanna thank all of you for the tremendous work that you have done putting together this report, and so looking forward to everything that we're gonna accomplish. We have a meeting on a little bit of regular meeting of the city council. So I just want to ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Motion to adjourn, Madam President.
Second.
The motion has been made and second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yeah, I have it. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.